Now, I'd like to remind everyone about a few housekeeping things here. For the audiences who are joining us online, you can ask your questions. I'm very, very interactive in the way I run these sessions. So please ask your questions online using the GLOBESEC app. I have my tablet with me. The session time here is 30 minutes, and that will include all the questions from you. If you do have a question here in the audience, please raise your hand. Do stand up. Give me your name, the organization you represent, and keep your question quite short. We're running very short on time, so I want to ensure that we get in as many of your perspectives and questions as possible. I also want to make sure that our online audience knows to make sure that when you ask your question, please keep it succinct so that I'm not trying to figure out what exactly you're trying to ask, and that saves a heck of a lot of time too. Minister Jaishankar, thank you very much. Day 2 of your trip to the CEE. It's been quite a ride since February for not just the region, not just Europe, not just the West, but it is now trickling in terms of effect of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine into the rest of the world, the East, the global South. Paint us a little bit of a picture of India and how India has been impacted. You've come out of COVID, you've had issues on the border with China, you've come out of the Quad with many, many diverse and divergent opinions, and an economy that is looking to make dramatic changes, but in very difficult and turbulent times. So if you can paint us a picture of where India is at right now, and then we will pick up the conversation from there.
Okay, let me go with exactly that flow. I think, yes, we are largely out of the COVID, though it never quite goes away. But we're out of the COVID also with a strong sense of economic recovery. I think there's a lot of optimism about rebuilding, and not just rebuilding, but actually leapfrogging in many areas, particularly digital. I think we handled it very prudently. I almost am tempted to say smartly in terms of the financial responses, which was we didn't blow the bank in responding. We intervened where we had to, and very effectively. And at the moment, in a sense, the Modi government has just completed 8 years in office. And what we have done in those 8 years is really to, I would say, build almost, I would say, a social welfare society at a speed and a scale which the world hasn't seen. And in some ways, the COVID has actually hastened that. I mean, we are, for example, as an example, we are giving food support to 800 million people. And we've been doing this for more than 2 years. So that's like the population of the US and EU put together. We have a publicly supported house ownership program, which covers about 115 million beneficiaries, which is almost like building houses for Japan. Or even if you look at terms of, this campaign, this program actually to replace firewood with gas cooking. It's impacted 80 million people. That's like changing Germany's kitchen in the space of a few years. So there's a lot going on there. And why I mention that is many of the global developments today have the potential of actually putting that under stress. Your second reference was to China. Yes, we are going through a particularly difficult patch in our relationship with China. We've had differences in the past, but we've never had a situation where, after 1962, where really agreements on not bringing forces to the border have been disregarded. A very large number of forces have been brought to the border. We've had a clash. People have died. And this has not happened now. It happened 2 years ago. So in a sense, it's a bit of a diversion, but it's also a useful reminder to Europe that there were other things happening in the rest of the world which sometimes Europe perhaps doesn't pay enough attention to. And there's also been Afghanistan, and what happened there, the circumstances in which the Western, particularly American military forces left finally. And now we have Ukraine, and coming into this region, it's a region which I know well. I have lived here in Budapest and in Prague. And it's a region which has been very helpful to us when we wanted to get 20,000 students out of Ukraine. Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, even Moldova. But I think it's also important for people in the region to realize how this is playing out in the rest of the world, that it is creating a huge fuel crisis, a food crisis, a fertilizer crisis, pushing inflation in low-income societies which don't have the margins really to absorb that. And so it can very quickly become political in many societies.
I think that brings up an interesting question that's come in from an online audience member, which is relevant to this, this point that you make about the rest of the world versus right here, right now in Europe or in the West. How interested are the Indian people in the war in Ukraine? Is it a major concern? Is it a minor concern? And you've kind of alluded to the fact that it's affecting fuel, it's affecting food, but how interested is the populace itself?
I think it's a major concern. It's a major concern for two reasons. Look, today our existence is very connected. I mean, everybody sees things on the television, on their phones, on the net. So wherever you are, and because bear in mind today India is a very digital society. Even people at lower levels of income, the one thing they do have is the connectivity. So there is a lot of awareness. I don't think anybody, everybody is, to put it mildly, disturbed at the conflict. They see the pictures, they see that happening. But the other part of it is begun to impact people's daily lives. That it's impacting the petrol cost at the bunk. It is impacting your wheat cost in your shopping. It will have impact for farmers to get along with sowing. And I think businesses when it impacts business, because it is impacting business in multiple ways. There's a container problem, there's an insurance problem. You don't get certain commodities, or if you do, the prices are up. So it's disrupting life. And it's not a unique causal disruption. At the same time, I think some of the lockdowns in China are also having an economic impact. But when you disrupt the economy, it shows up in employment. So I think it does trouble people. Trouble people is a very
well, it's a job of a government. I understand it would trouble people. I think it troubles people in the West as well when cost of living crisis starts hitting. At some point, when you look at global supply chains, this is a very different world in 2022 that we operate in versus, say, in 1991, pre-liberalization, when India could afford to stand by non-alignment as it was defined then. I think a lot of critics would ask you the increase in your oil imports that have happened between 2021 and 2022, it's 9 times higher as of this month. You have been questioned in terms of that increased oil import from Russia, $95 a barrel for Russian oil, 119 approximately for Brent crude. Is that profiteering? Is that looking out for your own interest? What does that really mean for foreign policy in India? And how do you tie non-alignment with 9 times more oil imports out of Russia? How do you make the two meet?
Well, look, first of all, I don't see a non-alignment oil connection at all. Today Europe is buying oil. Europe is buying gas. I just read the new package of sanctions. Now, the package is designed in a way in which consideration has been given to the welfare of the population. So, pipelines have a certain carve-out. So and timelines have been given. It's not like tomorrow morning everything is going to be cut off. So people need to understand, if you can be considerate of yourself, surely you can be considerate of other people. So if Europe says, look, we have to manage it in a way in which its impact on my economy is not traumatic, that freedom or that choice should exist for other people as well. Now, in terms of our oil purchases, we don't send people out there saying, go buy Russian oil. We send people out there saying, go buy oil. Now, you buy the best oil you can in the market. So I don't think I would attach a political messaging to that. I would also...
How do you not conflate the two? I mean, I know the Indian-Russian relationship is strong, but you also have issues with China. How do you then sit back and define Indian foreign policy at this point where the West seems to be quite vociferous in trying to curtail funding for the war in Ukraine, whereas by purchasing this oil for national interest, India is being asked, are you funding this war?
So, look, I mean, I don't want to sound argumentative, but then tell me if buying Russian gas is not funding the war? I mean, why is it's only Indian money and oil coming to India which funds, but it's not gas coming to Europe which funds? I mean, look, somewhere, I mean, let's be a little even-handed out here. And even this, look, the whole narrative that it's gone up 9 times. I mean, it's gone up 9 times from a very low base. And it was a very low base because at that time the markets were more open. Why if countries in Europe and the West and the United States are so concerned, why don't they allow Iranian oil to come into the market? Why don't they allow Venezuelan oil to come into the market? I mean, they've squeezed every other source of oil we have. And then say, okay, guys, you must not go into the market and get the best deal for your people. I don't think that's a very fair approach.
So talk to us about the second aspect that Indian foreign policy is being questioned at this point when it comes to wheat bans and food bans of exports. How does that then correlate? Because we're talking about the global south and the east that is being squeezed by Russia's issues with allowing Ukrainian grains to be exported. But by India doing the same, again, aren't those weakest people in the world being subjected to the same kind of issues from India? Do you see that as supporting Russia, or is it a completely different element that we don't understand in the West, that your perspective is different?
I think answer is B. You don't understand in the West. But it isn't just the West, okay? I don't think people understand because they're not actually tracking the trade. We have been exporting wheat, okay? Typically, we export about 2 to 3 million tons. Last financial year was a better year. We exported about 7 million tons. This year, before the heat wave hit us very badly, the expectation was that we would do substantial exports, and we were open. I mean, in fact, Prime Minister himself had said on various occasions, saying, look, we see that there's a food crisis in the world and we'd like to be of help. But what we then saw was a kind of run on our wheat, a large part of it done by international traders based out of Singapore and I think to some degree maybe Dubai. The result was actually the low-income countries, many of whom were our traditional buyers, like our neighbors, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal. These are our traditional buyers, okay? Interestingly, the Gulf buys regularly from us. I heard Dr. Tedros in the earlier session talk about Yemen. Yemen buys from us. Sudan buys from us, okay? Now, what we saw was the low-income buyers were being squeezed out. The wheat was actually being stocked for being traded. So in a way, our goodwill was being used for speculation. Mm-hmm. So we had to do something to stop that because it was also impacting us at home. Our prices were going up. So I want to be very clear what we have done. We have actually said, look, we're not going to give speculators an open access to the Indian market so that the Indian customer and the LDCs of the world get the short end of that.
Yep.
What we are still open to doing is where we see a kind of a deserving country wanting wheat, very glad to supply it within the realm of possibility. And just for the record, I think we've done this year wheat exports to about 23 countries. The rate of export this year, if I were to take the same period as last year, my rough sense is it's about 4x.
Okay.
So actually, it's gone up. And I know in many cases, foreign ministers of some countries have called me up, and we have assured them that they would have access to our markets.
So this is all about stopping and curtailing speculation at the end
That's
of the
right.
day.
And preventing a diversion to high-income countries with a greater possibility to buy, because what we saw happen with the vaccines, we don't want to see happen with the wheat, which was the rich people got vaccinated and the poor were left to God and
well, that brings up a question again from the audience now, and I would like to ask, I will come to you. I want to just do one question from the online audience, which kind of follows up on your point of diversions. This person's asking, according to the Wall Street Journal, India is becoming a key point for transshipment of Russian oil to bypass sanctions. How does that serve India's foreign policy interests?
I don't know. Does whoever wrote that knows what transshipment means?
Well,
I mean, transshipment is when you get it. No,
us.
when you get it and you sell it to somebody else. I've not even heard of anybody in India thinking along those lines. So yes, we do buy.
So you're saying the Wall Street Journal report is inaccurate that they're quoting?
Politely, yes.
Okay. So
I can say it less politely,
India is
but
not a conduit to any Russian oil transactions.
No, not at all. I mean, listen, please understand the oil markets. There's an enormous shortage of oil. There's a physical shortage of oil. Getting access to oil is difficult. I mean, a country like India would be crazy to get oil from somebody and sell it to somebody else. I mean, this is nonsense.
So that is your question answered, and the minister's on the record. Yes, please. If you could stand up, give us your name and a brief question.
Konstantin Eggert, freelance journalist from Vilnius, Lithuania. Dr. Jaishankar, with the Indian government essentially ignoring war crimes in Ukraine, not condemning Russia, not doing sanctions,
Question.
you then expect, I'm totally sorry, I know what to do, with India counting on global support for in its struggle with China, its issues with China. How do you think you'll be trusted by others after that? Why do you think anyone will help Delhi after you didn't help others over Ukraine? Thank you.
You know, it's an interesting question which you might, I mean, not you, meaning you personally, but people might want to ask themselves, because if I were to take Europe collectively, which has been singularly silent on many things which were happening, for example, in Asia, you could ask, why would anybody in Asia trust Europe on anything at all? So here's the take. I don't think, I mean, first of all, I think you're mischaracterizing our position, where they have, for example, when Bucha happened, we condemned Bucha. And we actually asked for an investigation into Bucha. In terms of what is happening with the Ukraine conflict, our position is very clearly that we favor an immediate cessation of hostilities. It's not that we've ignored it, unless you call phone calls to Putin and Zelensky as ignoring something. So first, I would urge you to get the factual position accurately. Secondly, in terms of the connection you are making, look, we have a difficult relationship with China. We're perfectly capable of managing it. It's if I get global understanding and support, obviously it is of help to me. But this idea that I do a transaction, that I come in one conflict because it will help me in conflict two, that's not how the world works. So a lot of our problems in China have nothing to do with Ukraine, have nothing to do with Russia. They predate it. And there are, I mean, if we are getting into who is silent on what issue at what point of time, I could point to a whole lot of issues on which, as I said, I mean, Europe has held its peace. So, I mean, it's a great polemical point you made. So I take it in that spirit.
I think as a follow-up to that, a lot of the noises I've been hearing, both in the United States and here in Europe, is on a similar train, that you have a problem with China on the border. It's been going on for decades now. It is getting worse. What position does that leave you in when it comes to seeking support if further incursions are done, further skirmishes happen at the border or within the border, to kind of echo what's happening in Ukraine in terms of sovereignty issues that are being raised?
Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt you here?
No, please do. But I want to come back to a question, the crux of the question, which I asked a few people in the political circles, in the financial circles. What's your big question? And one of the foremost geopolitical strategists on Wall Street sent me this question for you. And the question is simple. If and when the choice comes down to it, not today, not tomorrow, but in the future, and she strongly believes it will, for India, will it become, in terms of support, the US or China? And that will be kind of a defining moment that comes out of the situation that we face with Russia right now.
Look, number one, why I wanted to interrupt you in a way. I mean, I'm partly reacting to the previous observation. You know, somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. That if it is you, it's yours. If it is me, it's ours. I think that's something, and I see, reflections of that. Again, in terms of, there is a linkage today which is being made. A linkage between China and India and what's happening in Ukraine. So come on, guys. I mean, China and India happened way before anything happened in Ukraine. So the Chinese don't need a precedent somewhere else in the world on how to, engage us or not engage us, or be difficult with us or not be difficult with us. So as I said, I mean, I just see this as frankly a not very clever argument, a very self-serving one. This idea that, your grand strategy must be about how you will choose. I will do what, as all of us do. I will weigh the situation, everybody, after all, how do countries eventually make decisions?
Mr. Jaishankar, there will always be two axes at this point. I think it's an understood, accepted fact that you have the West, US-led, you have China as the next potential axis. Where does India fit into this? But are you planning to not pick a side?
No, I'm sorry. That is exactly where I disagree with you. This is the construct you are trying to impose on me, and I don't accept it. I mean, I don't think it's necessary for me to join this axis or not, and if I'm not joining this, I must be with the other one. I don't accept that. I mean, I think I'm 1/5 of the world's population. I am, today the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. I mean, forget the history, civilization bit, everybody knows that. But I think I'm entitled to have my own side. I'm entitled to weigh my own interests, make my own choices. And my choices will not be cynical and transactional, but they will be a balance of my values and my interests. There is no country in the world which disregards its interests.
So, as a final question, because I know you have to go, and our time has been cut short a little bit by your staff.
And the coffee break is coming.
And the coffee break is less important, but your staff is insisting you have meetings. As a final question, then, to leave us with this perspective, as you say, there's a whole part of the world that we are ignoring, and the perspectives that we're ignoring. What will or what is India's position on the world stage? Because if you want to talk about 1/5 of the world's population, you cannot also sit on the fence when it comes to foreign policy matters. Non-alignment isn't plausible if you want to take your position on the world stage. What does it look like with 3 years of your government left, approximately? And what does
of this term? Oh, 2 years, actually.
Oh,
but
2 years.
yes.
Thank you for the correction. Or even in the next decade or so. What is India's position? Sitting on the fence is not an option to be a world leader.
Look, I don't think we're sitting on the fence. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't make me sitting on the fence. It means I'm sitting on my ground. And my ground is actually, what are the big challenges of the world? Okay, big challenges of the world are climate change. I think I'm very critical to the solution. I can be an exemplar. I can be actually an arena for an enormous leapfrogging of green technologies. Look at terrorism. Look at the emergence of a world order. Look at security. Look at sustainable development goals. I mean, you take any and all of the big challenges of the world, some part of the answer either comes out of India, can be contributed to India. And again, I hate to say, it's a bit like a broken record, but look, a lot of things are happening outside Europe. We have, partly because of climate change, for a lot of humanitarian, natural disasters, humanitarian responses. In our part of the world today, a lot of people look to us to help out. The days when they expected Europe to come, which Europe did at the 2004 tsunami, the difference today is nobody's even thinking of that anymore. So the world is changing, new players are coming, new capabilities are coming, but a new agenda must come. The world cannot be that Eurocentric as it used to be in the past.
And who will India play with? Will it be Europe and the US, or will it be China and Russia?
Look, they're not exclusionary, but we are a democracy. We are a market economy. We are a pluralistic society. We have laws and contracts. We have positions on international law. So I think that should give you a fair part of the answer. After all, you began the question with a reference to the Quad. I mean, even though we didn't get much time to talk about it, but the fact that you have today a grouping like the Quad, we just had its summit in Tokyo, where very important decisions were made on connectivity, on telecommunications, on supply chains, on cyber security, on maritime domain awareness. It should tell you something which direction we're going. So again, I urge you that don't use necessarily a caricature version of one situation as a yardstick to pass a sweeping judgment. Because even on Ukraine, do reflect on this point. Somewhere at some point, surely the conflict has to end. Somebody will have to, a set of people, it cannot be a single country, probably not, will have to engage the players. It is our collective interest to find some kind of resolution, unless you're throwing up your hands and say this is not fixable. So at that point, I think people will need us.
Says a diplomat, a career diplomat turned politician, learn diplomacy and keep going with it. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us, and thank you all for being part of this conversation. Please give him a round of applause.
Okay.
We're taking a quick break.